Chatty Get Ready with me, talking about what it's really like being sober at 26 years old. Now, I got sober at 24, right before my 25th birthday, so I've been sober for almost 2 years, obviously in my 20s, which I just never really imagined, you know? Like, if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be sober by the time I was 26, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are, and let's talk about it. I made some notes of things that I wanted to touch on, but of course, if you have questions that I don't answer in this video or in some of my other sobriety videos, leave them in the comments. I love seeing what people are curious about. I'm happy to expand on some of the things that I chat about in these videos, and I'm very open, I feel, with my journey to share more about that in any way that can be helpful. So let me get a little organized here. Let's talk about my decision to get sober at 24 years old. Now, I've made a video talking about my journey a little bit in my 1 year sober video, and I recently made another video talking about some of my top tips to quit drinking and how to get through early sobriety. But one thing that I haven't talked about too much is what it was like deciding to quit drinking at 24. Now, I had been sober curious for probably a couple of years before I quit drinking this last time. Like most people, or I should say a lot of people who drink in their 20s, I was a binge drinker, which meant that I didn't necessarily drink every day. I didn't drink heavily every time that I drank, but a lot of the times the weekend would come around and I would be someone who, you know, hit up a brewery or a bar. And so I would drink too much often, and I would wake up the next day feeling terrible physically and mentally. I had horrible hangovers. I felt incredibly anxious the next day. I'd feel like I was overthinking everything that I did the night before, what I said, and I did it because it was supposed to be fun and I was with my friends. And like, don't get me wrong, a lot of times when we were drinking, we were having fun. Like, that's fine. It wasn't like I was an absolute disaster every time I drank. But regardless of whether or not I actually made a fool of myself or did something stupid, I would wake up the next day feeling terrible. And I'd, be anxious about nothing sometimes. And that's not an uncommon thing. You hear about people talking about anxiety, and obviously a lot of people experience that phenomenon, which is unfortunate. But it just became really, really unpleasant. My hangovers were also absolutely brutal. I would puke a lot, I'd have horrible headaches, and I'd have to just lie in bed with like a rag over my face and rest, usually, to go out again that night and do the whole thing all over again. And eventually it got to a point where I was like, this is stupid. I keep putting myself through the same cycle that I can recognize is a problem for me, that's not making me happy. And that's when I sort of ended up trying to moderate. I thought that maybe I had a horrible problem that I couldn't drink, and it just set me down this sort of guilt and shame driven cycle of every time I did drink, or if I drank more than I said I was going to, I would feel even worse about myself. And that just repeated for like probably a year before I quit drinking, where I was aware of that drinking wasn't serving me. Deep down, I think I knew that one day I was going to quit drinking completely, and that just scared me so much that like it drove me to drink more, which makes no sense, but that's what it was. So on February 2nd of 2022, I was drinking a beer on the couch. I don't remember what beer it was. It was like just a random day, and I said, I don't want to drink this anymore, and I poured it down the drain. That was the last drink that I didn't even finish. Now, when I quit drinking that night, I did not tell people that I was quitting drinking. Originally, I would tell people that I was doing Frugal February, which I don't even know applies to alcohol, but I said that I wasn't drinking in February, which I think was a way to protect myself in case I failed. But it also helped me not have to deal with like the questions of, oh my god, you're never gonna drink again, you're really gonna quit drinking, why? Like, no one really asked a lot of questions. It was kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. And that was that. Now, I spoke about in my sobriety tips and me getting through early sobriety, I really like went full hermit, and I did not go out with my friends. I kind of avoided going to social gatherings because I didn't want to drink, and I felt like I wasn't in a place to be around a bunch of alcohol. in that stage of my sobriety. So by the time March rolled around and February was obviously over and I couldn't use that excuse anymore, I said, well, you know, I felt so good in February that I'm not going to continue drinking in March. And that's sort of when I got to the point of, okay, like I'm going to have to start telling people that I don't plan on drinking anymore. And I was really, really worried that I was going to be judged, which is not silly because that's obviously something that we worry about with everything, right? We don't want to be judged by people. That's something that most people tend to want to avoid. But I was really worried that people were going to judge me for not drinking. For one, I feel like we have this social construct of if someone isn't drinking, there's something wrong with them, and that's why they're not drinking. And I didn't know anyone who like just didn't drink because they didn't like the way that made them feel. You know, everyone that I knew that didn't drink, which was like a total of 2 people identified as alcoholics. So I was really worried that people were going to judge me, including my friends. So by the time I got to a point where I wasn't drinking still and people asked questions about it, not even in like a prying mean way, just in like a, oh, I thought you weren't drinking in February, you know, you're still not drinking now. That's when I really had to take that leap into saying, hey, yeah, you know, I'm just not drinking. And I was so afraid of that. And here's the thing, and I feel like this is a really important thing that I want to get out in this video. Not once in my year and 10 months sober has anyone ever been mean or judgmental to me about my sobriety. My friends were incredibly supportive, even with strangers. Later down the line when I started going to, you know, events with other people outside of my friend group, you know, for the first few times where I had to introduce myself as being sober or tell someone that I don't drink, again, I was so worried of what they might think, and everyone has always been super kind about it. Most of the time people just, you know, will say something like, oh, that's cool, and then move on, and that's it. Sometimes people want to talk about it a little bit, and that's cool too. But not once has anyone been like, oh my god, you're so lame, or like, what, you're not gonna drink? Here, have this, you know, like, it's just never happened. And I'm not saying that it doesn't or that it never will to me, but that was such a real big fear of mine in terms of getting sober, that people were gonna judge me for it, and that has never happened. If anything, people have been really sweet and celebratory of it, even strangers, which I just think is like the most wonderful thing. And every time I've shared that I'm sober, that I don't drink, people have always congratulated me on it and, you know, just been really nice about it. So that's the first thing that I want to get out of the way. I feel like our fear of being judged is so misplaced, especially when you're doing something that really benefits you. It's as if I said something like, I'm trying to eat healthier. Like, no one's gonna be like, oh, really? That's so lame. You're trying to eat healthier for your well-being? Gross. You know, like, it's just not a thing. And I think we need to reframe the way that we think about sobriety, not necessarily in the frame of it being a problem or someone being sick or having a disease that you don't have, but genuinely coming from a place of, hey, I don't drink because it makes me feel like shit and I feel better when I'm sober. That's it. And again, I've never had to defend that to anyone if that's something that you're worried about. Now, another thing that I was really nervous about was that drinking was going to ruin my social life. And this was, I feel like, a more valid one because, like, I was a party girl. I was big on the beer scene. I'd go out in my town a lot. I was very social. I was, you know, out and about drinking all the time. And people knew me as someone who drank, you know what I mean? Not necessarily, again, like in a bad way. I was definitely someone that was out a lot. So when I was thinking about quitting drinking and when I did quit drinking, I was really nervous about what that would mean for my social life. Like, the reality is, like, when I thought about anything that I did for fun or for social activities, like, everything revolved around drinking in some way. When I hang out with my girlfriends, we went out for drinks. If I was cooking at home, I was having a bottle of wine. If I was going on a date, we were also drinking. Alcohol was just everywhere in my social life. And I didn't know what I actually enjoyed doing outside of that. And that was really scary because I didn't know, like, what were me and my friends gonna do if we weren't drinking? How was I going to feel hanging out with people if I wasn't drinking? What was I gonna do on the weekends if I wasn't drinking? And that's something I actually spent, you know, a good bit of my early sobriety figuring out. Like, what do I actually like doing? And I had to learn all of that again when I was sober because Like, I really had no adult friendships where I like never drank. I was so worried that my social life was going to completely fall apart when I quit drinking, and here's the thing, it did. Like, my social life as I knew it doesn't exist anymore. I don't like going to breweries, the places that I used to frequent all the time. I obviously don't anymore. And I did have to rediscover like what I could do with my friends that didn't involve drinking. I had to relearn how to talk to people and get through anxious moments when I wasn't drinking. I had to work on my confidence, which was non-existent when I was drinking. And I had to rebuild all of that. And now my social life looks very different in the sense that like I don't go out much anymore, you know? Even when I hang out with my girlfriends, like oftentimes they don't drink when we're hanging out, or they'll drink non-alcoholic options. And ultimately that has been so special because you really get to connect with people in a way that's truly vulnerable and makes you appreciate that friendship and that connection more than I ever did when I was drinking. Now on that note, you know, I feel like I need to mention FOMO because that's definitely something that I was worried about and that I experienced in my early sobriety. I did worry that I was missing out. I feel like, you know, we're also sold this idea that your 20s are for when you're supposed to be wild and young and crazy, and sitting around at home getting through early sobriety was not exactly aligned with that. It's not like I was going out and dancing on tables sober. And I felt like I was missing out, like I was doing something wrong because I wasn't doing that. Your brain is going to romanticize all of the good times, you know? And I would think about like, oh, but remember when it was fun, and you know, we'd be out late and talking to strangers and you'd feel so good. And it never really was like, hey, but then also remember like how horrible you felt the next day. So the whole idea of FOMO was definitely something that I dealt with more in early sobriety as I was sort of creating and navigating my sober life. Today, I have filled my time, my nights with the things that I actually love doing. And I've realized that like for me, a fantastic Friday night is sitting on the couch watching TV with my cats with the fire going. Like, I love my cozy nights. I love going for walks with my partner in the evenings. I like going to bed early, and more than anything, I love waking up the next day feeling freaking fantastic because I didn't drink. And then, you know, the feeling of FOMO wore off where I'm not actually missing anything. Another thing that I've had people ask me on TikTok is how I feel about hanging out with people who drink. Now, I have one friend who quit drinking alcohol about 6 months after I did, and we went out for drinks the other day and had our mocktails and sort of reminisced about how crazy it is that so much time has passed since we stopped drinking and how it's been, and that was so awesome. But like, I didn't have like a sober friend who was my age, and all of my other friends still drink alcohol. I do also hang out with people who still drink around me. We had a game night the other week where, you know, my friends were drinking around me. We always have alcohol in the house, and this is sort of a two-part thing. Today, I don't have any problems being around people who are drinking alcohol. I'm very confident in my sobriety. I know why I don't drink, and that makes me feel secure in my decision. I'm not tempted by drinking alcohol. I genuinely have no desire to drink at all. And I don't mind people drinking around me. That's, you know, their choice, and it doesn't affect me in the slightest. I usually have my non-alcoholic alternatives, and I feel great about that. I will say that I don't enjoy being around drunk people, and I feel like there is a difference. A couple of times being at like an event party where, you know, at the beginning of the night people were just starting to drink and we're having great conversations with people, and then slowly as the night progresses and people drink more and more, I now know exactly when it's time for me to leave. Generally, it's just not a very pleasant thing to be around drunk people, which I think is so funny because, you know, when I was drinking, I really did think that when I was drunk, I was very funny and very sexy and very cool. And there's not a single person I've met who I prefer drunk to them sober. Everyone is funnier, smarter, cooler, and more attractive when they're sober. So in those few cases where I'm like at events and stuff, I'll just leave before everyone is very drunk. And I probably wouldn't attend like a late night event where I knew people were going to be drunk by the time I got there. It's just not fun for me, and I feel like, you know, being sober puts me on a different wavelength, that I like to have authentic connections with people that they're going to remember, and being really drunk doesn't really align to that. And overall, I feel like my friends who do drink are very conscious of that and wouldn't invite me to things that revolve around drinking. It's just, I know what I enjoy now, and I really don't feel left out when I choose not to attend sort of drinking focused events or activities. Now, my last note on here was about regrets, and do I have any regrets about getting sober or anything that I miss about drinking? And the reality is that I really don't. And when I quit drinking, like even the day that I quit drinking, I would not have believed that I would be sitting here like saying something like that today. Like, I do not miss alcohol at all. My only regret is that I didn't quit drinking sooner, which, you know, is sort of hindsight 2020. Everything that I learned about my sobriety and everything that I know about being sober now is because of my experiences when I was drinking. I've never felt more aligned with who I am, how I show up in the world, that I'm making the most of my life. I've never been more confident in myself, like genuinely proud of myself. Like, I like who I am. I am confident in who I am. I am confident in what I believe. I show up every day as myself. I show up as the best friend that I can, as the best partner that I can, and I show up for myself in making a promise that benefits me and really sticking by it. And that has been just such a powerful thing for me in sobriety, is really getting to know myself, what I like, who I am, where I want to go in life, and alcohol really kept me from that. And I feel like if you're in a place of even coming to this video because you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, or are even like just considering the idea of not drinking, that your life could be better without alcohol in it, try it out, because there's a good chance that it will be. Lots of people will regret drinking the night before the next day, but there's never been a morning where I wake up after being out or doing something and thinking, oh, I wish I had drank. I wish I had been drunk last night. It's never happened, because why would it? I can go out, I can have fun, I can have more fun than I used to, and I go to bed feeling great about myself, and I wake up in the morning feeling refreshed and ready to take on another day. Being sober in your 20s is awesome. It's like I'm never going to be younger than I am today, and I get to show up fully present, and I have more fun and better friendships now than I ever have. And that's, again, something I wouldn't have believed if you had told me that when I was drinking. So if you are in a sober, curious place, like, quit drinking for 6 months and see how it goes. Alcohol is always going to be there if you want to drink down the line, but why not see if sobriety feels good to you? I feel like that's something that, you know, 6 months into my sobriety, it was like, oh my god, I get it. Why didn't I do this sooner? And I feel like if people gave it a shot, or like just consciously made the decision to try not drinking so they could see how they feel about drinking as well, it would just create a lot more of a conscious and mindful drinking culture that we just don't really have, because people don't really have a moment where they make a decision, a conscious and informed decision to drink. It's just something that everyone does, and that's usually how people start drinking. And it wasn't until obviously later into my drinking career where I had a moment of like, wait, why am I doing this again? Like, why is this part of my life? So I think that about covers it for today's video. I hope this wasn't too rambly. I feel like the responses to my sobriety videos have been so positive, even though, you know, putting yourself out there can be scary. It makes me feel like I'm doing a good thing sharing my story. So thank you so much for the positive feedback. I appreciate you being here. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel for more sobriety content. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.